Callie, you know, in our teas, we asked the question, do you use generic medication? And in between the break, I said, so what if you do? We all do. And there is a very important, and this is fascinating to me, Callie, there is a very important thing that is important for all of us to know if we use generic medication. Who at home? I see you raising your hands.
We all do.
We all
Right?
do.
We all do.
So, Callie, talk a little bit about that. If folks
Sure.
use generic medications, what do they need to know?
Sure. So the big issue with generic medications is, first of all, we're all kind of pushed that way from our insurance companies. And it's hard to kind of say, no, I actually want the brand name versus the generic. And the reason why, if you can actually get the brand name, that you might have some better protections if and when something happens to you, is because in our country, you actually cannot bring a lawsuit against a generic manufacturer. So if you've got a failure to warn case, which I know we talk a lot about on the show, or a design defect, meaning there's something in the drug that makes it a little bit more unsafe than it should be, then those are claims, if you're taking the generic version of that, that you cannot bring a lawsuit on. Only if you're bringing the brand name, if you're taking the brand name medication, can you do that.
So I was asking the question, why is that? Why is that the case?
Well, that is what the FDA and our government have decided. They have decided that once a drug has been approved by the FDA, as long as the generic manufacturer is making basically a carbon copy of that, they're not changing the warnings, they're not changing the prescription label, all they're doing is basically making a cheaper version of it and putting it out on the market, that they cannot be liable for that.
And Callie, you can't step around that generic manufacturer and get to the original producer of the medication.
Correct.
If you're taking the generic, you're sort of left without a remedy.
That's correct. And a lot of consumers don't realize that when they're getting prescriptions from their doctors, but it's something worth discussing, especially if there's some side effects that you're maybe curious about or a little bit nervous about before you take that drug.
So I just found that fascinating, just to know that. I think it's important for us to know that. I also thought about something else. I saw one of the commercials advertising, and we know, like with a lot of medications, they say it may have the side effects and it goes through this long laundry list. I'm curious if one of those side effects does happen and someone's harmed by it significantly or even dies, can you go back, let's say that it is the name brand, can you go back and sue that company, or is the fact that they say these are the side effects, it gives them immunity from being sued?
Sure. So if you've got a case like that, because we all see the commercials, they've got 100 different warnings that they're putting out there for it, including death every time. If you see one of those, typically if it's headaches, hey, this medication might cause headaches. Well, let's say you take the medication and then a month later you start noticing that you still have these headaches, you're not taking the medication on it, and now your doctor says, well, these might be lifelong, permanent, and they might become more severe over time. You will have a lawsuit in that instance, because if it just warns headaches and doesn't tell you the severity, the permanency and frequency, those types of things, that will give you an avenue to recover. Because most people, when they think, oh, I might get a headache an hour after I take the medication, that's what that warning would be for, not lifelong and chronic issues.
And that can happen with some medications, that those side effects become?
Yes. Yes.
But the important thing is, if you get the generic version of that medication, even if it lists those side effects and you come up with problems, you cannot sue, correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so important, I think, for folks to know, because like we said, we all do it.